Welcome back to another episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. I'm your host, Jesse, the writer, director, and narrator for the Lost Codex episodes. And with me tonight, I have not one, but two very special guests, reoccurring guests. Number one is Jack, recurring for the second time on the Lost Codex podcast. Welcome back, Jack.
Hello. I was here last week. We spoke about Forsaken and all of their awesome potential, and I got murdered by the Banshee Queen for my transgressions, resurrected again, and now I'm totally on board. She's very morally gray.
Very, very morally gay. Gray. Morally gray, not morally gay. I have to edit that out.
Was that wait, was that an appropriate introduction, or am I going to stir the pot there?
No, that's okay. I made it inappropriate by saying morally gay. So
morally gay.
You know what? I'm keeping this in. Whatever. It's not offensive.
What?
Sylvanas, morally gay.
Everyone's a little morally gay for Sylvanas. It's like, you love her. She's hot. You love her, but like, oh, you're a bad person.
This is, and you know what? There's
the definition of morally gay. Like,
there's no better way to reintroduce Isei, coming back for I don't know how many times. I don't even need to say who that voice is because we all know that's Isei talking about her hots for Sylvanas and all that. Welcome back, Isei.
Everyone has hots for Sylvanas. I'll just throw that out there, whether or not you agree with her political alignment. And yes, I am back. Did you miss me? I know I did.
It's been 4 weeks, 4 podcasts since you've been on. I did 2.
I know.
One with Jack. I did the review, and then I did Jay the Bard and Draenei Part 2.
You?
I know. People, I had to split up the Draenei love because there was like 3 weeks in a row of Draenei, and it was people were getting
just
pretty.
3 weeks.
Just 3. I know.
Just 3 weeks.
We have like
absence makes the heart grow fond.
We got 16 more parts to go, and then with Jack, we got like a 20-part series on Forsaken. So we have to break it up. But tonight we've got 2 guests, Jack and Isei, both here, both reoccurring guests, and we're going to be talking about roleplay, the introduction to roleplay in World of Warcraft. And I think this is going to be a series. We're going to come back to this because we can't talk about this all in one night. But before we dive into roleplay, let's talk about some news of the week. Most importantly, Transmog. If anyone was paying attention to the World of Warcraft beta in the last week, you will have seen certain, not only Transmog sets, but Transmog weapons that are coming in Battle for Azeroth. Now, we know for a fact that these weapons are coming from island expeditions, and what's really cool about these weapons is they use old models with skins that we haven't seen before, or they use entirely new models that were in the files. We've seen them on NPCs, but they've never been made available, and with this last build, we've got a whole bunch of old tier sets of colors we've never had accessible to us before. And as a Transmog enthusiast, this makes me so excited.
It is. So if you ever wanted to like live your dream of being an NPC, now's your chance.
This is your chance. And
pick your corner, get your Mog, and just, live your life. Or life less as an NPC.
What frustrates me with all these different sets in game is that there's all these awesome pieces of armor and not all of them make it to live. And I understand there's gameplay decisions for them, but like, for example, in Legion, there was all these awesome Vrykul sets that were in the files, and the new Vrykul models in Legion actually are a player model. They have, changeable tattoos, changeable hairstyles, changeable beards, and so these sets were made, in particular, one cloth, leather, mail, and plate, for the Vrykul that we see in Stormheim, but they never made them accessible or available in game. When Trial of Valor came out,
they're saving it.
Maybe.
For heritage armor.
Well, in this last build, there's two of the sets are available now. The Dragon Rider set, and there's a plate set, which is really cool. But seeing them in the files and seeing them running everywhere, but not being able to play or get them in game, a little bit frustrating. So I'm so glad that Blizzard has taken these island expeditions in Battle for Azeroth as a way to get Transmog that has been missing for so long.
It was like the ultimate Mog block,
That's exactly it, Mog block.
It's a Mog block. It's like, oh, I really wanted, oh, hey, you guys, you want to see these awesome sets we have? Yes, we want them. You're not going to get them. Oh.
And the worst part was, or just with every build, you get a new patch with new tier sets, and there's that one color you love. And that one color you love is either not in game or mythic, and you're never going to get it. And
until the next expansion.
Until 6 expansions from now. But with this new patch, they put in a whole bunch of old armor sets, which is awesome. So I'm excited for that. And old weapons as well that, you know, the Monkey King's staff, whole bunch of things from Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor that we see everywhere, literally everywhere. But they didn't actually...
that Northrend two-hander sword with the glowing beam of light in the center.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yes, that is so dope. And it's like, where did that come from? It's like one of the cooler swords that's coming in battle for Azeroth. So I'm excited for that. Speaking of Battle for Azeroth, we have found on the calendar on the beta that the Teldrassil event name, so the lead up to the battle, the burning of Teldrassil, is apparently called the War of the Thorns. And it says it ends on July 17th on the beta. I wonder if ending on the July 17th means it's going to go live on July 17th on live servers. But what do you guys think as a name for that, War of the Thorns?
I wonder how literal that's going to be. Where does it come from? War of the Thorns. Is it because it happens to be on Teldrassil? Are we going to see a lot more druid involvement, maybe? As they desperately try to save Teldrassil?
I think it's going to be a great Game of Thrones episode. It's going to be just
honestly
delightful.
It is very Game of Thrones-y, isn't it?
It is.
It's like, wow, they're taking it up a notch. I thought we were cool, guys.
I am curious what makes it a war of not thrones, Game of Thrones, War of Thorns. Yeah, are we going to see a lot of stuff going on with the tree? Is it not just going to be like burn it and it's done? Is a lot of the fighting going to happen there?
I just want to see the Horde druids and how they take this, because Cenarion Circle is very close with both Horde and Alliance druids.
Sure.
And this is really stepping into that, you know, Scenario Circle business. How would they react to it? That's what I'm more interested in.
What I think is interesting is, with that, is especially in the book, and we won't talk too much about the book because Isei hasn't finished it, but there's
I'm like a third of the way. I'm sharing a book with my boyfriend, so we just can't finish it at the same time.
Have you gotten to the part in Thunderbluff where Sylvanas is in Thunderbluff?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm going really slow.
Well, without spoiling what happens in that scene, there's a remark that Hamul Rune Totem makes, and even though he's the arch-druid of, like, the Horde, he is the druid representation of the Horde, all of his comments are very, very neutral, very not Horde-driven. And so, as you said, the Cenarion Circle... Well, he has to be. But he's only talking in front of Horde leaders, and yet his voice is still very neutral. So, it's almost a question of, will Horde druids even be involved in this event? Will, aside from the player, will that because we have a lot of grunts and we have a lot of Forsaken assassins and we have a lot of Darkspear Shaman coming in, but I haven't actually looked at what's going on the beta for that event, but will we see Horde druids, and will they be okay with that? Will they be okay with this attack on Teldrassil? We know for a fact that Malfurion is heavily involved. In the Battle for Azeroth Collector's Edition, we're getting two novellas in the box, and one of it is Sarfang versus Malfurion, and he's doing everything in his power to stop the Horde's march. So obviously Malfurion's gonna have a big role, but what about other druids? And I'm curious to see.
He's actually gonna be useful this time?
Yeah, like for once, Malfurion's gonna actually apparently do something. And I hope to see.
So we're talking about the same Malfurion dead weight storm rage.
Yeah, well,
okay.
wow, we say, ooh. Tell us how you really feel. The thing about Malfurion is,
I love him, but he did nothing. That's why I'm just upset.
You're 100%
He's a great
right.
damsel.
He great damsel, and the thing is, Malfurion is an absolute, like, if he wanted to, he could absolutely decimate the Horde. He is more powerful than Thrall.
And we saw none of it.
None of it. We literally saw none of his primal druid. You know, every time he appears in novels, he's a god. And then when he appears in game, he's not.
He's nothing. And I understand they want to kind of like pull back a little bit on the big name lore characters, so our own heroes and characters can kind of shine. But I just want to bask in their glory. When I see Malfurion in game, I want him to just destroy, just level out an entire legion space. And I just want to live it. I just want to see it. I just want to.
And I'm hoping this event shows that, and I think we will. I'm curious to see if we'll see him in a cinematic, because that would be, we've seen Thrall in his primal raw form. I want to see Malfurion doing the same thing, because his tree's under attack by the Horde, and I want to see drop. And here's the thing: I'm totally kind of derailing, but there's a lot of players feel that Blizzard's writing with the Horde is they're painting them as evil. The Horde is being painted as morally gray. But the problem with Alliance heroes is all of our heroes go neutral. So maybe the Horde does get leaned towards the grayer side, the blacker side, in terms of, okay, this isn't neutral, this is pretty dark. But a lot of Alliance characters just go full on neutral, and seeing, Khadgar, Malfurion, Velen for a lot of the expansion, Magni, all these main names is kind of like, man, I want to see one of you do something, and I want to see Malfurion just drop that. I know he helped Horde in Val'Sharah. I know Horde players were in the Dream Grove, Horde Druid players, but his tree's under attack, and I want to see him, pull out his baby feathers and just go ape shit on the Horde. I want to see that happen.
Exactly.
So that apparently ends on July 17th. So who knows when the event's going to go live. But both the March through Ashen Vale, which has a whole bunch of world quests tied to it, Dark Shores battle, and the actual burning of Teldrassil, and the battle for Lordaeron all has to happen before August 14th. So we're getting close.
That's a lot to happen.
Yeah, we're getting close. And I wonder, Blizzard likes to spread their events over time, but I wonder if they want to go for a more canonical period of time stretch. So
more tension.
Literally is going to be back to back 4 solid weeks. Instead of spread out over the course of a month and a half, it's going to be week 1, March through Ashenvale, week 2, Burning of Teldrassil, week 3, the follow-up, week 4, Battle for Lordaeron, bam, expansion drop, no dragging it slowly. Like, the Legion attacked us for a good month before we went to the
And it does have to contend with still the best pre-expansion event, which was Wrath of the Lich King. That's still, in my opinion, hands down, one of the best pre-expansion events. The whole with the ghoul attacks and the cities and things like that. That was awesome.
It really made the world feel like it was under, like the Lich King woke up, so it has to contend with everyone.
That, in my opinion.
Agreed. And so I think with the way that the structure of Blizzard storytelling has been going, especially in Legion, it's going to be a more episodic event in that it's going to be directly involved. It's not going to be, we're not going to be spread out around the world like we were with Legion, with the defense against the ships and all that. This is going to be, you have to be in this location at this time because these are what's happening kind of thing. So I'm excited. That's happening soon. And the last interesting piece of news to talk about, and in hindsight, I realized that we can't go into too much detail because Isei hasn't finished the book, so we'll just tease a little bit.
Oh, okay. I'll be careful.
The Tomb of Uther has been updated on the beta.
Gonna lore block me?
Pretty much, we're gonna lore block you here.
We're lore blocking, yeah.
You know kind of what happens in the book, but we're not gonna just say anything. The Tomb of Uther has been given a beautiful new tomb in Western Plaguelands? Western Plaguelands, yes. And his, what would you call that? What would you call his tomb? It's,
remodel?
There's a name for it.
The kind of style of building it is?
Yeah.
You mean?
It's when people are buried in a building. Mausoleum. Like, it's his own personal...
Mausoleum.
Yes!
We all struggle for the same word. He gets his own mausoleum, and what's interesting is it's not just an update in that they're using... Because a lot of the buildings in Battle for Azeroth that are human-based use the garrison style of artwork from Warlords, which is good because, all the castles and inns of humans used vanilla models, so they're updating them. But this uses entirely new stuff. There's a whole new stained glass window in there. There's these shields hanging with the Lordaeron crest.
A new statue.
And the statue, the notes here say Uther is pretty. Like, Uther is full on chiseled.
Uther is pretty.
And it's like his hero's model. And there's a lot of implications of what this...
And a lot of attention to detail to the whole area. It's very well cluttered and...
Why?
It is important. If I know anything in World of Warcraft, when something that's put a lot of detail into it, means it's important. You got to pay attention to that.
Why are there passages leading under the tomb? Where do those doors go? Where does that go?
To the right and to the left, there are gates that are in front of passages. Now, if you use spammy, glitchy methods, you can see that the passages aren't finished, but it's beta. You know, there may be something there eventually. And the question is, where are these going to go when they finish this? They're updating it still every build. You're seeing new stuff being added to this tomb. So where do these passages go? Why were they added? They were not passages here before, and they were clearly, explicitly added. Where are they going? Listen to the previous podcast and draw your own conclusions.
Where I'll leave this off, this note is, in Legion, Paladins visit Uther's tomb, and he talks to you and Maxwell Tyrosus, and you basically ask him, where is the Ashbringer sword? Like, can we reclaim it? And he's the one who tells you that Tyrion's actually still alive, and then Uther's ghost fades off into whatever. And that uses the old tomb. And so, if there was ever a chance to update the tomb for even a small purpose like that, it was Legion, but they didn't do it in Legion. So why are they doing it now? What purpose?
What's more important than an artifact quest?
Exactly. What purpose does Uther serve now in the story? And you say, once you're done your story, once you're done the book, we can.
So all those other Ashbringers that every other paladin has, they're confirmed as fake.
They're all fake. I'm the real Ashbringer. Let's dive right into this whole topic of role-playing in World of Warcraft. Now, before we do, the reason why I have Jack and Isei on is because I met both of them on Worm-Rested Cord, on roleplay servers in World of Warcraft. Both of them have impacted the community in their own ways. We know Isei and her Draenei wrestling sport. Jack was part of the Scythe of Sylvanas roleplay guild a long time ago and has participated as an active member of the roleplay community. Both of them are roleplay enthusiasts and experts, so that is why they are here to introduce roleplay.
Ooh, experts! I like that.
And
I like that.
I thought, I know a lot of roleplay friends, but these guys, you guys are the ones that need to come in and talk about this. So, roleplay in World of Warcraft, what is it? Jack, you start us off.
So it's exactly what you'd expect. You are playing a role. You have this character that you've created. Normally, I'm just talking game mechanics here. You've created, say, a Blood Elf Paladin. But you are choosing in roleplay to assume that role. You are going to play this character in the world, and you're going to take into consideration who they are. Not just who you are as a player, but who this character is. I'd say that's a pretty basic explanation. On a deeper level, it's going into it's improv storytelling, because you aren't just writing fan fiction. You're actually interacting with other players who are choosing to do the same thing, not interact as players but as their characters. Does that sound right? Would any of you?
It's like community
some of those
storytelling, because it's not just from your point of view, but it's also from everyone else's who's interacting with you as well, and that's the fun of it.
Yeah, and you're all doing this under the umbrella of the lore. You're choosing to take the Warcraft lore and roll out of it, and then play it. You're role playing.
It's a very active, creative way of just kind of bringing yourself into a situation you're never going to be in your life, and with friends.
The thing about what kind of really drew me into World of Warcraft was, as we all know, so many of us have played the old Warcraft 3 games where we got to play the heroes like Uther, Thrall, Jaina, Arthas, and then the whole appeal of when they announced World of Warcraft was you get to make your own orc, troll, human, dwarf, whatever you want. And essentially, every World of Warcraft player is playing a role in some way, whether you're playing a dwarf or a dwarf warrior or whatever you do. But where roleplay realms really differ, as Jack said, is you're taking on the role of your character. And there's a whole process. And we're going to talk about the process in a bit, but you have to create your backstory, your character's personality, quirks and flaws. And I think Isei and I talked about it in our first podcast, is you're type acting. And you don't think about this, but a lot, people who act may have stage fright. And it's very common for new role players, even roleplay veterans, to get that sort of stage fright. You walk up to a group of people and you start typing out your emotes and what you want to say, and everyone turns to look at you. And there's that, oh my god, there's 17 people looking at me right now. And sure, you're hidden behind your screen, but suddenly what you type matters. And there's a little bit of a stage fright thing, which is quite common.
Yeah.
And
I still get it.
Same. I've been role playing for years, and there's still that, you say the one thing and suddenly you draw all this attention. That's the thing. One thing
to kind of like calm you down, especially if you are the type of person to get stage fright, is that everyone is there for the same reason.
Yes.
You're not going to stand out when you role play because everyone there is also role playing.
You're all being equally nerdy. You're all being, you're all doing the same thing. No one's going, look at this nerd, because you're all being the same nerd there, and you're all doing the same thing. And sure, there's certain things you may say that draw attention, but that's more the context. Everyone it's in the same way that you approach a group of people and you say something, everyone's going to be looking at you. No one's going to say, look at this guy talking. No one's judging you for talking. It's more what you say. And that comes down to who your character is. We'll talk about that after, but something that...
You're worried you're going to stand out. You're not, but that's a good thing.
Or you can stand out in like a fabulous way, because you've got a great character, and they're like, "Damn, look at this fucker." Can I say that?
That's okay. That's okay. I'll keep that in. You called Kalia a basic bitch last week in last week's episode, so you know what? That's gonna be. And I had a couple people message me about that, going, like, I laughed when your host called Kalia. Would you say? Kalia doesn't even have a special model. She's just wearing a basic bitch robe, and it's like, oh my god.
That is the quote. That is the direct quote.
True.
So, with something you did say, like a quote we will say from last week, Jack, is when we briefly mentioned roleplay, you get to live the lore, and that's what I don't think many people realize, what a roleplay realm is about. And, you have your character... And no matter what your character's backstory, what happened to them in the past, and what their quirks are now, these major events that happen in the here and now in World of Warcraft, you get to live that character as it's happening. So the Legion attacking, you get to be in this world under attack by these aliens. You are a human soldier of Stormwind, and your king just died. You get to be there. Many roleplay servers had memorial services, and to this day, in August, there is the anniversary memorial service for Varian Rin, because that is something that would happen. Your leader died, sacrificing himself. Same with the Horde. Vol'jin's death, the death of Tyrion Fordring. These are things that affect your characters.
Is Vol'jin getting anything similar, or are we just kind of like sweeping him under the rug like Blizzard did?
Well, I don't think there's, I'm more talking about like roleplay events in particular of variants.
Just saying, Horde, guys, come on. Do Vol'jin a solid.
I think I saw one Vol'jin memorial, but it's Vol'jin. He'll come back. He's friends with the god of the dead.
He'll come back. We'll see.
Varian's gone. I think
it's because we're still in denial. We don't want to call it quits.
That's it. Vol'jin had it in with Bwam Samedi. Varian, is just gone. So,
and also with these events, you have to keep in mind that these are players making these events. These aren't Blizzard sanctioned, I guess, or Blizzard made events. These are players making these events for other players, and that's the importance in a way of role players in these servers to bring this type of lore to life.
I may be getting ahead of myself here too, but like sometimes the players doing these things can actually inspire Blizzard to make that part of the lore. Like if the players come up with something very inventive, that may become part of the Blizzard canon later. And that's really fucking cool. You're not just living the story, you have a potential to affect it, because Blizzard devs also play on these servers, and some of them do engage in roleplay.
As we know, Isei herself came up with Jedheen, the wrestling sport, and that is now canon on Argus. Darren DePaul, who voices Ramul, talks about Jedheen in one of the quests. It's a voice acted quest on Makari, on Argus, and that started with a role play event. So these different events that happen, they fill in the gaps, and that's what's kind of cool about these little micro holidays that Blizzard implemented, because they wanted to implement, holidays in Azeroth, but roleplay realms have so many of those. I think it's on Moonguard, correct me if I'm wrong, you say, the tournament up in Northrend, the yearly tournament?
Oh, yep, it is in Moonguard, yep. It's a big thing too.
What's it called?
Tournament of Ages.
Tournament of Ages, and it's basically a massive server event. Thousands of players go there to go to the tournament grounds in Northrend, in Icecrown, and have this. And the turnout is amazing. If you ever get a chance, I don't know when the next Tournament of the Ages is. It passed a couple months ago, but the turnout is amazing, and it's a great way to just get a feel for what roleplay realms really are like with these events that may happen either as memorial services or things that happen as a direct response. For anyone who didn't listen to last week's podcast, we'll get Jack to reiterate. But Jack, tell everyone listening about the South Shore event and what our guild did back in the day.
I was like, oh, how much should we reminisce? I had another event to bring up, which was the Death Knell Questgiver thing we used to do.
Yes.
To encourage people to roll Forsaken, but that's a different thing entirely. Back in the day, we once decided to go and plague South Shore as Forsaken. This was during Wrath of the Lich King, before Cataclysm. So South Shore was still a standing city, not city, but a settlement across from Tarn Mill in the Hillsbrad foothills. And we decided we really built up for this event. So we had to have engineers creating those green smoke flares to look kind of like plague, so we could throw smoke around and we're doing this like actually for real. And we had other people making like these engineering things that looked like pumps, and it was this whole multi-week process of building up. And we had this is going to be a broad number, but between 20 and 40 players. It was a big thing for like a roleplay guild to organize. And we showed up there, and we plagued that shit. Eventually, the city was plagued, which felt like great foresight on our part. But it was a ton of fun. And seeing that made us feel validated that it did eventually get plagued. Like, I don't know if it was because we had done that. I highly doubt it. But it made us feel very prescient. And it was like, I'm doing something. We didn't know it was going to be the story. We were just like, we're going to plague South Shore because that's what the Forsaken would do right now. And we were right. The Forsaken would go out and they'd go and plague the nearest human settlement because they're trying to expand their territory and they're trying to expand their numbers. And, as a player, you don't sit there and go, oh, why doesn't Blizzard do this? You just go do it, right?
And I honestly, I can't remember if it was when the beta for Cataclysm was live and if we knew if South Shore was being plagued, but later on when we found out, it was this, no one in the guild took credit for being the ones who plagued South Shore. We know the Forsaken destroyed South Shore, but it was that I was there for that event. I was there. Yeah. I changed the world. Even though Blizzard didn't say, you know what, there's one guild did it, we're going to do it. It had nothing to do with that. It was this neat follow-up of, oh, look, the world has changed. South Shore, as horrible and awful as the plaguing of South Shore as an event is, being part of that story arc was fascinating, was interesting.
And that's what it is. You're part of the story. You're part of the story of Warcraft. You're not just an observer. You're part of it when you're role-playing.
I didn't want to bring this up, but I feel that I have to because I've mentioned it here and there in certain podcasts. But and I don't know if you were around for it, Jack. I'm not sure if you were there for it either, Isei, but after the Siege of Orgrimmar came out, so the entire Mists of Pandaria expansion was a bit of a hellhole in Orgrimmar for Moonguard and for Wormrest Accord. And the reason was Garrosh's Kor'kron were on the rampage. And Orgrimmar is a hot spot to role play in on roleplay servers. But you have to keep in mind the narrative of the story. And the narrative of the story was Garrosh's Kor'kron it was a regime. No crap was being taken. You couldn't run through the streets and scream, I hate Garrosh. And so for months, there was a lot of scenes where there were many Kor'kron players, and they knew their time was coming. They knew that Garrosh was eventually going to get overthrown. So Siege of Orgrimmar came out, and there was an entire server event of the Siege of Orgrimmar being played out. And afterwards, but there was different iterations of that. After, I think it was agreed upon a month and a half after the Garrosh kill, I remember it was after BlizzCon, there was a server-wide event called the Kor'kron Trials. And Garrosh...
Oh, yes, I was there for it.
Garrosh Hellscream, as we know, was taken to Pandaria for his trial, but the Horde players of Wormrest Accord said, What about the Corcoran? What about, Garrosh's
These
brutes,
assholes.
these assholes who terrorized?
They knew what they were doing.
They knew what they were doing, and the Corcoran role players totally agreed to it. Actually, I'm pretty sure they were the ones who came up with it. They got to play the villains for once, but now there was punishment. Now those who didn't die in the Siege of Orgrimmar, those who were quote unquote arrested. I'm just moving my chair. Those who were quote unquote arrested suddenly had to face the consequences of their actions. And so basically it was an agreed upon event that took place in Thunderbluff, and all of the guilty Corcoran, or the Corcoran who were being put on trial, were marched from Razor Hill through the Barrens.
Oh yeah.
Into Thunderbluff.
Fun.
And it was a 7-day long event to march from Razor Hill. And if you hopped on every night, if you could make an event, you couldn't, if you couldn't, whatever. And when you got to Thunderbluff, all of the prisoners were put in it was one of the inns in Thunderbluff, and the judges, there was a representative for every race. Tauren, Blood Elves, Goblins, and even the non-Horde alignments, like Cenarian Circle, the Argents, the Kirin Tor. I don't think the Death Knights were there, but everyone else had this representation, and you were brought out into, every character got a unique chance at when their trial was. And the trial was, I'd say, about half an hour long. And it lasted a month long. And the event was huge. There were people running out. There were people who were screaming and booing, because these were criminals. These were mostly orcs, but there was some goblins, and there was one Prendarin in particular who was a crazy Garrosh fanatic, and weird characters that were being put on trial for supporting Garrosh. And when you think of Garrosh supporters, you instantly think of Malkarok from Tides of War, this insane Blackrock orc who was just so sadistic and cruel. And what we saw in Nazgrim was that not every orc who sided with Garrosh was sadistic and cruel. So when these players were being put on trial, you really got to see, okay, this orc is, for example, my orc was put on trial, and he wasn't an insane, cruel, sadistic orc. He was an old orc of the Warsong clan, and to him, following Garrosh was the only option. He made a blood oath when he was younger, and that blood oath says, follow your chieftain, follow your war chief. And not only was he following his war chief, but he was following a Hellscream. And that was key. And just like Nazgrim, maybe he didn't agree with everything that was going on, but it was his duty to his dying breath to obey his war chief. And he was denied that warrior's death. He didn't die during the siege, and he was put on trial. And eventually his fate, he was actually sentenced to trial by combat. If he won, he was allowed to walk free into exile, and if he died, that was his trial, his punishment. And I remember this was kind of unscripted. My orc was one of the last orcs to have the punishment inflicted on him, the trial by combat, and everyone was in Thunderbluff, and he was to be moved to Orgrimmar because there was the fight was going to be in Orgrimmar. And I remember he was being moved to the Zeppelin, and there was a kind of surprise event. I was kind of notified ahead of time, but I went with it, where some Corcoran who did escape trial, who did escape being arrested, actually busted him out of jail in this sort of Avengers style. They hijacked the Zeppelin, and there was a Forsaken mage. He was actually the Forsaken representative for the jury. He actually instilled chaos in the event, and he was letting prisoners go because he wanted to see chaos happen. And he actually ended up freeing my orc from his chains, and these other orcs came to rescue him. And they weren't like noble orcs. They were sadistic, cruel, but they were other Corcoran like him, and they busted him out, and they hijacked the Zeppelin, and they escaped into the Barrens, and my orc ended up escaping. Whole story goes on, but it was this really cool event where basically I was told, like half an hour before, by the way, you're being busted out. And I was like, wait, what? No, like I'm really excited for my trial by combat. And they said, that's not happening. And I went with it. And it was this really cool jailbreak event where I think there was about 30 people that just kind of swarmed and got in on the event. And we ended up escaping. And this event went on for a month and a half. All these different orcs, many characters, many players actually killed off their Corcoran. They They had played their Corcoran all through Mists of Pandaria, and now they were these horrible, sadistic, brutal characters, and they needed to. They needed to die. They needed to face their judgment, and it's totally... And this is important. When you make a roleplay character, your character's fate is up to you. No one can tell you that your character is dead or alive. That's up to you. So if you want to keep... If your character's in a battle and you don't want him to die, that's totally up to you. The other player has to respect that, because this is your character. So...
And you often discuss that in whispers. That's why, Jesse was informed ahead of time, like, hey, this is what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Because he may have been even planning to die.
I may have wanted my character, and so I had someone message me saying, hey, Jesse, we're going to be busting your orc out when they get to the Zeppelin. And I thought, I was kind of looking forward to this little event, but I said, I'll go with it. And I wasn't ready for my character to die. So this was a cool kind of improv, and many orcs were.
Everything requires consent. Anything that you're not doing to your character that somebody is doing to your character requires your consent.
That's it. And I knew many, and it was neat in a way. A lot of these characters I had gotten to know over the whole course of Mists of Pandaria, and I sat there as my orc watching this event, and he watched them get executed. He watched these characters say their final words, say their scream their last scream, and they were executed, and these characters were wiped, and that was totally up to the players sitting behind the keyboard. They were like, yep, I'm okay with it. Kill off my character, go for it. And this was a whole organized server event, all because Garrosh Hellscream survived the Siege of Orgrimmar, was put on trial, and someone said, what about his officers? What about those loyal to him? Blizzard hasn't covered this. Why don't we cover this? And the event, I remember hundreds of people were there. And so that's just huge. Two examples, the Plaguing of Southshore and the Corcoran trials, that are these notorious, well-known events on roleplay servers. You say, I haven't let you speak in a while. Is there any event that you've been to that has been directly impacted or manufactured by the lore?
All talked about specific events we've participated in, we know of, and the grandness of them. But I still think the best way to put it about what's the appeal of role-playing events, it's the same reason why we don't just watch a BlizzCon live stream and we don't just read about it, because we want to be there. You cannot compare reading about BlizzCon over participating in it.
I think that's a great analogy.
But it's true. How many people are just they're just gunning to get those tickets. They travel halfway across the world to get to Anaheim, to get to BlizzCon. When they can just easily sit at home and just watch a live stream or read about it the next day. Because it's not enough. They have to be there. They have to live it. They have to soak in the screaming, the yelling, the energy that it surrounds. It is something that they have to have. They have to come back home with knowing that they've been part of that.
That's the experience. That's being part of the experience. Saying I was there. Mm-hmm. Just like we were saying, with the events, I was there in a way.
And again, we could put 10 other different events we've been to and the grandness of them and how awesome they were. But in the end, you kind of mash it all together. It's that feeling. It's you have to be there.
There's also the day-to-day. It's the day-to-day of being a Horde or Alliance soldier and talking to other people or civilian. There's a cool feeling to walking around and experiencing and stumbling into some personal scene that's just a couple people where you don't even know what's going to happen and you guys are figuring it out together. That's really cool. And it's all based in the lore. That's what binds everything, is that it's all based in the lore, whether it's two people hanging out in some random zone that's not even relevant to what's going on right now, to the multiple 100 people events that are all based around a major plot point in the universe.
And I think that's what's so fun about roleplay servers in general, is you can have the Corcoran trials about this moment in lore, or you can have your own little guild story about going to this island, going to the ruins of this place, going on this expedition, looking for an artifact that's relevant to only you and your guild that has nothing to do with the whole storyline of the game, but you're making your own story. So Blizzard gives you a world, Blizzard gives you these huge stepping stones, but you can make your own story, and that's what's so fun in role-playing in World of Warcraft. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's a whole new style of playing World of Warcraft because, you know, you've got your PvPers, you've got your raiders, but now there's this storytelling element to World of Warcraft that you're not bound by anything. You're allowed to do what you want, tell the story you want. And I know so many people who just play the game solely for role-playing in universe, in character, in this world that Blizzard has given us. With all this in mind, with, you know, living the story and living the lore however you want, there are going to be some negative aspects. And as I mentioned earlier, when you type act, you're going to have what's called, you know, everyone calls it griefing in some way in World of Warcraft, but specifically to roleplay servers, griefing is what you see on Moonguard in Goldshire. Griefing is when non-role players make a character for the sole purpose of trolling, for the sole purpose of disrupting roleplayer, for the sole purpose of disrupting roleplay just to get reactions, just to be funny. You know, it's been done on streams before. It's been done by popular streamers. Anyone who plays on Moonguard, I play on Moonguard, Isei plays on Moonguard, Jack, you have characters on Moonguard. Everyone knows that Goldshire is a tourist attraction. There's no one native to Moonguard who goes to Goldshire. It's all tourists from other servers who are just going and creating this maelstrom of a cesspool. It's this continuous traffic of just people trolling and people being the worst kind of possible role players, in that you're doing something for attention and you're doing something to be disruptive.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Go ahead.
Like when college kids go to like Mexico or Florida for spring break, like that kind of
yes,
like their is to be disruptive.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah, Moonguard is not representative, or at least Moonguard is representative. Moonguard is a good server. Goldshire on Moonguard is not representative of their community, because a long time ago, some folks, you know, decided to make a joke out of erotic roleplay. And they decided to make this strip club inn, and it became a thing. It is now ingrained as part of that server that you go to Moonguard to make fun of role players by, you know, doing all these various things. And I'm sure you're all familiar, if you've ever heard of roleplay, of Moonguard and Goldshire. That is not roleplay. No, it's not. Or I shouldn't say it's not roleplay. It's not the type of roleplay we're discussing. It is more emblematic of the type of roleplay we're not discussing. Those are things like, you know, trolling, using toys, various things to jump on people, to disrupt them, to bother them. And there are other forms of griefing that are more insidious and less common now that role-playing has become more accepted. The first thing is just kind of like, you'll see somebody kind of walk past, and then, you know, some characters may be engaged in character. And there's, you know, if you're totally brand new to roleplay, there are two modes of conversation. One is in character, which is using the /say and emote channels and whispers to some extent to have like dialogue in the voice of your character and describe the actions of your character, and you have no regular player discussion. Regular player discussion is called out of character. We do that in whispers with brackets to denote that it is out of character, or in like party chat or guild chat or something like that channel. So you see people talking in character, in their characters' voices, and then you go and you start jumping on them, or like you mount up and do all kinds of crazy things, or like use a toy, and that's disruptive. That's griefing. That's trolling. And then there are forms of trolling that regular our peers can do that they may not realize is trolling, or very poor form and very poor etiquette. Those are things like god moding and doing non-consensual RP actions.
And to kind of jump on the trolling aspect, it can be as simple as throwing down, and you know, toys, like using your toy collection in game. That's not a bad thing, you know, especially given
toys could be Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I would say exactly that. Toys can enhance a scene dramatically. It can go from talking between two apothecaries and pretending there's a cauldron of blight in front of you to actually putting down a cauldron of blight in front of you, and it's a prop.
Yes.
It's a prop for a play. Instead of pretending you're holding this, bam, it's there.
Or you have a romantic picnic, and then suddenly there is a romantic picnic.
That's it. The umbrella and the little basket. But where it becomes obnoxious is, a ceremony in the Cathedral of Light, and no one's talking except for the bishop at the front, and someone runs in and decides to put down the toy train. So suddenly everyone in the cathedral starts going woo woo, which totally disrupts the tree. It's like in the middle of a wedding ceremony, some guy, a nudist running in, screaming with a horn, and then running out. It's just obnoxious.
How's that a bad wedding?
I'm just saying that, it depends on the wedding, but you know what I mean. And then god moding and stuff like that. What Jack means by that is, let's say there's a bar fight and you play a guard. So you're here to stop this bar fight from getting out of hand, from anyone from murdering each other. Well, the guy who's started the bar fight decides that he's bigger and stronger than you, and then he's going to pick you up and snap your spine over his shoulder and rip off your head in one movement. He just not only killed your character, utterly destroyed your character. And that's not his call. That's, again, as we said earlier, everything that happens to your character is up to you. But if he plays the action out as it happening, as him actually doing it, he's taken away that consent from you and has just entirely chosen the direction of your character, basically forcing you to do something, or forcing your character to do something that you yourself did not do. That's called god moding. That is something that is frowned upon in all types of roleplay, in that, especially combat, when you fight someone, it's an attempt. You attempt to swing at them. You attempt to cast a spell. You attempt to, like D&D, you roll
exactly like
to see how effective it is. Trying to think of another example of god moding. Knowing another character's background. Let's say Jack and Isei are having a conversation, and I walk up and I read Jack's description, and I decide to tell Jack that I know all about his secret crimes that he's committed, and there's no way for me to know that, but because I, Jesse, read his description, I translated that in character. That's a little bit like, no, there's no way you could possibly know that. And that's the whole fun of these characters, is getting to learn each other's backstory, getting to tell the story rather than just reading it and suddenly knowing everything.
Oh, speaking of descriptions, I don't know, this may be a digression. I don't know how introductory this podcast is, but there are various add-ons that you use to give your character descriptions, if you aren't familiar with that as the listener right now.
I think we'll dive into like the preferred ones, but especially for the for the backstory, when we get to the backstory bit, I totally forgot about that. So when I referred, as Jack just said, when I referred to add-ons, there's an actual, you can download these little add-ons that give you in game a little bonus profile that you can type out your character's description and backstory and hair color, weight, height, all this stuff, to add that little extra flavor stuff. I mouse over your character and I don't just see Bob, this human warrior. I'll see Lord Bob of House This, the human commander of this particular guild. I'll be able to see all those details and ranks and titles. But essentially, there are bad forms of roleplay and etiquette that people don't follow. And, they're trolls. They're just people that are looking to get reactions. And the best thing to do is to ignore them. Message them, ask them to stop. If they're doing it intentionally, they're probably not going to listen. Just ignore them. There's nothing you can really do.
Report them.
You could report them.
On roleplay servers, the rules are more strict.
They are, especially the naming convention on roleplay servers.
Yeah, you can't be like Big Dick Bob on a roleplay server. You have to be something that sounds
I
legit.
most certainly will be Big Dick Bob.
Who are you?
You
can
probably make a case for Big Dick Bob, but you can't be like literal Britney Spears. Or something. Britney Spears doesn't exist in this universe. She'd probably be named like Stitney Piers.
You can actually.
I think she does exist. I think she's a Zandalari NPC. She literally sells
Of course
spears.
she is.
Yes,
Actually,
yes.
What a game.
It's new, and she sells spears.
You got Trump.
Ah, shit.
She is. She's
There goes
a
my argument.
Zandalari NPC that literally sells spears.
Okay, Britney Spears does exist in this universe. However, like, you don't know who to say now because anything.
Blizzard got ahead of you.
An example.
Undermining my argument.
You can use out of world examples or in world examples. You name your human Death Knight Arthas with 6 S's. You're not Arthas. You're not playing as Arthas. Your demon hunter isn't Illidan XX. You're not Illidan. And so people
but to challenge that, what if, because especially it's very common back in history, I'm talking about real life right now, in historical times, it's very common to name your child after an important historical person, especially after the birth of a king or prince, whatever. That's why Richard happened to be a very popular name at the time.
That's fair.
That's thing, your character could be named Arthas because your parents just wanted to name you after a very important historical person at the time. And back then Arthas was a very liked prince. Not to say that you're related to Arthas, saying that, my mom, we just happen to share the same name, no relation.
That's like being named Adolf Hitler.
There are people
that are named Adolf. That's the thing.
There are lots of people.
That's true.
And so that's actually that's a great example
that's a good
of,
point.
You want to name your character after an existing character. There can be reasons for it. Don't pretend you are Arthas, but maybe your parents did want to be trendy in Lordaeron and name you after the new crown prince. Later on, they're probably regretting it, going, "Ooh, this was an awful decision. Why did we do this?" But
you're naming for Hitler, but you're not literally Hitler.
Exactly. And so there's always.
Clearly, name your child Hitler. You're like, "Oh, we bet on the wrong guy."
This was.
We probably shouldn't have named him his last name.
I see people, and I'm not making a parallel between Sylvanas and Hitler, but I see people naming their daughters Sylvanas. I saw it on a Facebook group the other day. Someone named their daughter Sylvanas, and I'm sitting here going, yeah, Mommy, who am I named after? And then just flickers of the Wrathgate and South Shore and these different horrifying PTSD events of, you're named after a very cool lady. Like, oh my god.
She's morally gray.
Morally gray. As Blizzard loves to say, Sylvanas isn't evil. She's morally gray. 3 people just stopped listening to the podcast right now because we upset them about Sylvanas, but that's okay.
So many thumbs downs in this,
holy moly, and we're not
2-minute period.
There they go.
And keep in mind, Jack is or was Sylvanas' #1 fanboy. He was Nathanos #2.
I insist on us doing a podcast on this at some point because I actually had some great arguments in favor of Sylvanas pre-current events. Like, we could go a history of Sylvanas' morality when she was morally gray.
That's in the past, though. You can't use that.
No, you can't use it.
Okay.
But
I will, and then I'll use that to deconstruct the current arguments because they're very similar to the old ones, and the old ones no longer apply.
That'd be a great podcast. We'll have both of you guys on when I'll just be the media. I won't talk the entire podcast. It'll just be an entire debate. But moving on,
mediate.
I'll be the mediator. All in all, you get to live the lore. The lore is the language that we use to bring our characters to life. The lore is just your open storybook. And Isei said earlier, I was there. I got to do this. Going to BlizzCon is not the same as watching BlizzCon, living the events. What about the actual events that happen in the story? And the one thing that comes to mind for me all the time was the Siege of Icecrown Citadel.
Ooh.
And that was a big battle. That was a battle of Death Knights. That was a battle of Paladins. That was a battle of Horde and Alliance. The Ashen Verdict. Mages. Tyrion Forging. All bringing down... But it's a huge fortress. So you could logically assume that it wasn't 10 people and it wasn't 25 people only who destroyed all of Icecrown. It was done in waves. And so saying I was there and I killed Arthas... little bit of a, we know a very small group of heroes did. And on roleplay servers, being among those 10 people to claim that you killed Arthas, it's not wrong. It's not bad. Would you guys say it's frowned upon? What's the best way to describe that?
I would say participated in it. That's nothing bad.
I'd say like I was one of a very small group, and I was definitively part of that group, is frowned upon unless you pull it off really well or do it in
well, think about it this way,
small
because
group of people.
those that did participate in it, they're not named. That could be anybody. That could be you.
That's
but what happens?
Fair counter argument.
That's the rub. So the counter argument that I've made and have heard is that, like, yeah, but putting yourself in there gives you a tremendous amount of story power. And unless you're using that story power in a way that's wielded with a purpose, it's just kind of there to give you like artificial fluff. But if you're saying I was part of that small group that made it to the top and managed to kill the Lich King, like that needs to be a cool thing that's like gonna be character defining. That's a huge thing, that's major. Don't just say that to be cool. Like, don't just be like, yeah, whatever, but now I'm just drinking in a bar because whatever.
I mean, why not? You're allowed to drink after you defeated the Lich King, yeah.
But
you earned that drink.
But my point is, like, make it cool. Maybe say I'm a grizzled veteran, and now I'm just going to have a drink because I was there when I killed the Lich King. And like, I've got the scars to show, but now you're super interesting.
To say I personally...
See, that's a cool character idea. You could be that old man that just tells the same story over and over and over. It's like, yes, we know, you went to the Citadel, great.
But okay, so there's the kicker though. If your character trait is you're this old, whether you've got like memory problems or you're known as this obnoxious, maybe that's your whole trope is no matter where you are. It's a
one-trick pony kind of thing. You can be part of a big lore event, but it's the only thing your character is going to stand on. You're going to get boring really quick.
And maybe that's your thing. You go to an event at the Cathedral of Light.
But yeah, but you can use that to your advantage. You could be like that one-trick pony guy that just tells the same story over and over and over again. At first it was really cool, and after a while I was like, okay, and then now it's like, dude, you're boring. It's
that one friend who always says, man, I got to shake Obama's hand. Like, we know, you've told us. And if that's if that's the angle you're going for, that's great.
Awesome.
But if you are... Sir, welcome to the tavern. What have you done? Tell us a tale of battle. Well, I helped kill the Lich King. I punched Illidan in the face. I killed Deathwing, and I slept with Thrall. Like, what? No, all these different things.
Wait, go back.
What was that last? Pulling that list of here are the huge characters that I've killed in lore out. It's something of a frown upon, and it has to make sense for your character. So here's an example. My Death Knight, every Death Knight had an enormous incentive to go to the Siege of Icecrown, but I don't want my dwarf Death Knight to have been one of the guys to stab Arthas's floating body in that final phase. So for me, it's easy to deconstruct the Siege of Icecrown Citadel as, I'd like to think that the Forsaken are the ones who helped bring down help me out here, Apothecary.
I mean, you can be part of the event without being at the front lines. Just because your Death Knight goes to the Citadel doesn't mean that they were the front lines. They could be just at the bottom trying to hold back the horde of undead trying to climber up to the top.
And that's the
thing.
Which
is cool, and people are going to be less resistant
without being at the front.
To say...
Like, you could have been on the cool fucking warship. Not the warship, the airship.
The airships. You were there representing...
I remember that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, also... I'm kind of iffy. I'm on the fence about telling people how to or how not to roleplay.
Sure.
If you have your heart set, if you really want to be part of it because it's like a cool event for you and you really want your character to be at the front lines and maybe even to, I don't know, big lore character shook your hand before they went and attacked the siege, whatever. Do it. If it makes you happy, do it.
I think Isei brings up a good point.
The wrong way.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
There's no wrong way to roleplay. And that's actually what you and I talked about that in our second podcast. Yeah. We're not here to tell you how to roleplay. There's
no wrong way to roleplay so long as you're respectful about it and it makes you happy.
That's it. And
that's true.
As Barbosa says in Pirates of the Caribbean, they're guidelines. There's no rules, they're guidelines. So if you roleplay your commander as the slayer of Deathwing, Arthas, Garrosh, and kill Jaden, someone's gonna... To me, that's not interesting. I want to talk to the soldier who single-handedly manned the mortars in the Siege of Orgrimmar and took out a group of Corcoran that was going to intercept the heroes, and, you saved the day by taking out a couple of Corcorans who were going to ambush. That's more interesting than personally...
Back to Deathwing, when I was doing the Deathwing raids, and oh my god, I hated them.
Oh god.
Because my god, that last part on his back. Oh my god, it was awful.
I know, that's exactly what I was thinking
but
of.
the thing is, okay, nobody else could have taken down Deathwing other than Thrall. But you could say you were one of the many dudes up on his back, just tearing away at his scales, just doing whatever you can, just grabbing on as this dragon was flipping through the air. You could say you were part of that. You could say you were wearing down Deathwing in order to make Thrall's kill easier.
And I feel like we have one overarching point here, which is that you can do all of these things. The point is that some of them are harder to do well. It's easy to say, I'm a civilian, I just live a normal life, I fetch buckets, and I'm really owned. That's a reference to old Emma.
That's last week's podcast. Oh my god. Sorry.
What was I saying? Oh, but it's harder to make it a convincing point to other people. Because remember, this is collaborative. You're not just writing fan fiction. And
no one has to believe you either. You can come back saying you were part of every single major event. There can be people sitting at the bar, sipping their drinks going, yeah, sure. Like, how much of that is true, huh? No one has to believe it. No one, yeah.
It's just hard to pull. Like, if you wanted people to hear you and take you seriously, it's harder to pull off. You've got to have a great story for people to buy it, whereas if you do something simpler, it's easier to sell that. And especially if you're a beginning role player, I'd recommend starting simple and then building up and then adding.
Work your way up.
Work your way up.
It's very tempting because we all want to be like stand out.
We all want to be badass.
Have like cool stories. We want to be badass. But just remember you're competing with a lot of badasses.
I think we're
all badasses.
And this kind of jockeying around can get out of control real quick in role-playing servers.
That's like the literal lore of the world, that we're all badasses.
That's the narrative that Blizzard gives us, is we are the champions. But that's what I love about roleplay servers, is I don't have to be the champion. I can choose to be a professor in Dalaran. I can choose to be a little apothecary. I can choose... And
you'd be surprised how many people choose that route. And all of my role-playing friends, guilds, on Tumblr, on Twitter, most of the role players, very few, I mean, minor few, maybe big, awesome, important people. Most of them, they have like a job rather than just a role. They have a job. There are a lot of professors, a lot of adventurers in the explorer kind of way. They do herb collecting. They kind of work with magic and just kind of fiddle with it. They're archaeologists,
The everyday life of Azeroth.
There's more everyday type of role players than there are big heroes. They do participate in big events, but they don't make it the main part of their role play. Because, when Argus opened up, almost everybody went to Argus. And everybody was scrambling for a reason to go to Argus. It's like, oh man, I really want to go, but is the icy angle, is the icy angle correct for my character?
Is the in-character angle, yeah. Like
I know, I was like,
Something Jack said earlier about making an important boss kill relevant to your story. An example that came to mind is for my Forsaken apothecary. He was at the siege of Icecrown, wasn't fighting in it. He was one of the backline apothecaries. He was making brews and potions for the Horde soldiers. But during the attack on the plague part of Icecrown Citadel, he was among the Forsaken who swept in and cleared out Professor Putrecide's laboratory after. So my Forsaken...
Yep, you can roleplay as the cleanup crew.
Literally, he went in and I remember saying that he saw Putrecide's bloated, enormous body, and he swept in and started sweeping up all these different experiments and going in to say, yeah, I was part of the siege of Icecrown. I didn't get any kills, but I went in, or I know there was a lot of Death Knights on Wyrmrest Accord who went in and were taking out, different floors. There's different floors, different balconies, different alcoves within Icecrown. You could have been anywhere in that huge battle. You don't necessarily
have an epic fight.
Having their own,
and here's another thing: you can lie.
You can.
Your character can lie and say he was part of this event and yet never was.
And you hid under a table.
Because a lot of people have very big stories to tell, and sometimes you kind of get roped into, bedazzling, I guess, your story. because everyone's talking like talking a big game, and you're kind of like, yeah, I wasn't there, so you kind of make up a few things.
People do that in real life,
and people do it in real life, and it kind of gets out of control.
I also love that as kind of like taking advantage of the trope of like, oh, I was there, I did everything, to like, I was there, I did everything, but it's all a lie, and I want you to discover it. I want you to actually be incredulous of me because that's my character.
People can call you out on it. They can probably ask you details on your character. Was like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, you can say like I tore off Illidan's wings and I have them mounted on my mantle. Like, no, you don't.
And that's the thing. And I want to give, I gave that idea of lying, and also to give people kind of like a way out in case maybe they started role playing recently and they kind of like, you know what, I really like my character, but I bloated his story way too much, and I really want to. I don't want to retcon. But I also kind of want to do a restart, but not really. Like, how can I kind of dig myself out of this hole? You can just say your character was lying.
Like I said, I was best friends with Madan, but now Madan doesn't exist anymore. Like, I don't know what to do. I just made up this dude.
Yeah, you can say your character was lying. They were kind of embellishing stories that, probably didn't happen, and everyone has done it.
That creates a great opportunity to overcome. Yeah. Which is like another point that we're going to get to later, which is that your character isn't just this static like trope of a Warcraft scenario. They're a living, breathing thing that you're playing, and ideally that character should change over time. Once you've got a great backstory set up, you've got a history established, and then as you play with other people, you're going to discover that there's a journey here. You're not just writing a story; you're living a story. The story is actively being written. That's really fun, and that's another unique thing about roleplay. That's
the best part. Is it's not just a single one-shot story. If you really invest yourself into these characters, you get to tragic things happen to them, tragic events happen to them that you choose how they react. You choose what their fate is. Do they die? Do they change who they are? Do they go from being the hero to the villain? And that brings us to our next part, which is you choose who you are. And when you create your roleplay character, you choose who you are. And a lot of people don't realize that, and we'll come to this, but you don't need to play your class or even your race. You can embellish all of that to a different degree. And we'll come back to that, but you don't have to be a hero. You can be a farmer. You don't have to be a commander. You can just be a footman. The choice, ultimately, is yours. You have a blank canvas when you make your character. And Jack said this earlier. Actually, both Jack and Isei said this earlier. This is a collaborative effort. You're not just playing. I know some people who it's called like single roleplay, and it's when you play your game by yourself and you're going through the storylines, and you play out your story to yourself. But when you play on a roleplay server, you're playing with a community. The cities, towns, the entire open world is alive, and it's your story mixed in with hundreds, and it's how you react to those stories that really make roleplay servers different than other servers.
That it's a collaborative effort, it's a community effort, and I imagine what people are starting to wonder is like, this is all great. I want to be part of this community. I want to be collaborative, but like, how do I do that? How do I take my level 110 warlock, who I have all of this like personal player memory about, and forge that into somebody who could be a role-playing character who isn't like a trope or isn't like just overblown with all of my own headcanon?
Well, the thing is like, I would say if you want to introduce a character you already have, but you never interacted with before, treat it as you would meeting any other person in real life. You're not going to sit down and start spilling your entire life story to them.
Sure.
You're going to start out with like, hello, how you're doing, very superficial surface types of conversation. And as you get to know them better and they know you a little bit better, things open up a little bit more.
As an aside, we mentioned this as a community. If you tell people I'm new to this, I'm a brand new role player, or I've only been doing this a few days, people are going to be like, they're going to be like, flies on flowers to make honey, and the honey is your role play.
I think
like
it's bees.
Flies
don't make honey.
No, avoid the flies. Those are the griefers. We want the bees, but they're not going to sting you. This is a horrible metaphor.
I'm sitting here with my hands in my face. my face in my hands.
Cut this out.
No. This is staying. I'll cut out the thrall bit. This part, the second you said it, I face palmed.
No, keep the thrall big.
Okay.
People want to know.
People need to know about the flies and the honey and the bees on Roleplay.
Ask C-Dev about
This is the
thrall,
type of
because we need
conversation
to
you
know.
have with your kids. It's like flies and the bees. Like what?
Flies.
Well, they're
to
gonna
the
make honey, and it's gonna be your role play, honey.
So
where are the rails? I can't even see them. They've gone past the horizon.
Okay, so let's get back on track.
I had a point.
You were
It's like walking into your room. It's a complete mess, but it's home.
I actually posted a
you know
picture
where
of myself
everything
right
is.
now in the selfie channel.
I did. I saw that. Or recently, or
That was literally as we were talking. That was literally right now.
where I don't see.
Oh God,
I don't see it. I see the one from like an hour ago.
Oh yeah, like half an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
That's close enough to right now that it's still accurate as a depiction of the space that I'm in.
Okay.
Well, I cut this crap out.
So as you just said,
Don't listen
Jack,
to me.
you have your character and you want to know how do you get started.
Yes.
So we'll kind of help with that. The first thing you got to do is choose your realm. Do you play in US realms? Do you play in EU realms? And this is going to stir some response, but for US realms, there are several servers that are more well known than others. And EU realms, as far as I know, Argent Dawn is the one. I know several European role players, and they all play on Argent Dawn. For US realms, Moonguard and Wormrest have this love-hate brother-sister relationship. I play on both. What about you guys?
So do I.
You play on both?
I do. Mhm.
And
I started.
I play for
Moonguard.
both games.
I started Moonguard and eventually migrated to Wormrest when it was first launched, and that's where my home is now. But I plan.
You always have a side server, okay? You have your main server, then your side server.
Yeah, you've got a side server because you don't want to just like put all your eggs in one basket.
That's
What happens
true.
when,
put all your
there's
flies
an
on one
event on
honey.
another server?
Don't put your flies
Yeah.
on one honey. So you got Moonguard, you have Wormrest Accord. Emerald Dream is I forgot about Emerald Dream. It's a little bit of a smaller realm, but
More very tight knit, very small.
a very small, tight knit community. And there's some RP PvP realms out there, but
Lightning Hoof! That was actually the one I started on, RPPVP.
I started on Lightning Hoof too.
really,
So yeah, the primary difference that I hear about Wormrest Accord and Moonguard that is often uncontended, but you'll find opinions on the difference between these two. We're talking US here. Is that Moonguard tends to have a lot of like bulk roleplay. They tend to have like a lot of events, very big guilds, and a lot of random roleplay. But they're a little looser in their lore restrictions, which can be good. That allows you more freedom in your character, allows you more freedom in creating events. Wormrest Accord tends to cherish more like storylines and very deliberate, very careful lore curated events. There's still random roleplay, but it's a little more not sparse, but it's not quite as
It's more
copious.
intimate.
It's more intimate. That's a
It's
great.
a
that's what I
good
was searching for.
vacation like spot to go to when you kind of feel overwhelmed with Moonguard and it's like I still want to role play, but I just want to take a breather at the same time. You go to Wormrest.
Moonguard's a party. Wormrest is an intimate cocktail event. That's my perception of it, and that's how I've heard it described. People may disagree, and I'm sure they do. Don't thumbs this down.
it's too late. They've already thumbs it down. It's
Yeah.
but there's no wrong realm. And the thing to remember is Wormrest Accord is newer.
Yes.
Wormrest Accord started when Wrath came out. That was my first introduction to roleplay, was rolling.
That means it's fucking 10 years old.
Yeah. That's what's crazy.
Wow, thank you for reminding everybody how old they are. Right at that moment.
Wormrest Accord is the new realm, and it's 10
God.
years old. Good God. And Moonguard was around before that, and Moonguard we mentioned this earlier, has that negative aspect to it of Goldshire. When you say Moonguard, most people think Goldshire, and that's what's unfortunate. Everyone who plays on Moonguard, it's kind of like The Lion King when Mufasa says to Simba, "Don't go there." No one goes to Goldshire when you play on Moonguard. They know it's there. They know the elephant graveyard's there. Just don't go there. And that's the best way to describe it. But when you compare Wormrest versus Moonguard in a general conversation, Moonguard does have that negative vibe right away because of Goldshire. So we'll say right off the bat, don't let that cloud your
Agreed.
idea of what Moonguard is, because it's not. As Jack said, it's a party, and it's an old party. There's, it's one of it is the oldest roleplay server on US Realms that has been this active and this alive for so long. So don't dismiss it because of those foul rumors and things that you've heard, because that's just one small dark stain on a really bright realm. So you pick your realm, whatever it may be. And now is the character creation. And this is where things get fun, because we have a structure here, race, class, faction, but it really depends on what you want to play. And
yes.
So let's assume you're going to choose by race first. When you pick your race, you don't have to explicitly, and this is interesting with Battle for Azeroth, and I think this is a whole separate conversation on its own, but when you pick your race, you don't have to necessarily be the race that you physically look like. And a good example is many people roleplay as Wildhammer or Dark Iron Dwarves already. Now, Wildhammer, no plans for Battle for Azeroth, and Dark Irons, as we know, they're coming with the launch of the expansion, but there have been gray skin options for dwarves and certain face models that have red eyes that people have chosen for years that they have played as Dark Iron Dwarves. And even though you can't customize tattoos in the game, there are people who play as Wildhammers, and by their transmog and by their set, they look like a Wildhammer
and description.
Dwarf. And description, too. When there's those add-ons, you mouse over that dwarf warrior who's strolling through Stormwind, it'll say, Hygar, the level 110 Wildhammer warrior. And you can change the name of your race with these little add-ons to give it that little extra flair. Same with orcs. There's no Blackrock skin that exists in the current orc models on live today, but many people have played Blackrock orcs for years. They have played Magar, the brown skin. They have played as, I've seen a couple of Fel orcs in my day of the red skin. Yeah. So it all depends on, and actually, as a good example, Jack's Forsaken was a high elf. So there was, I believe, yes. Was it your character who had the wilted ears, the rotting ears?
Yeah, he had wilted, rotting ears, because that would be the distinguishing feature, which you couldn't assume.
Exactly, but in game, you looked at it, you just saw a human model, but when you moused over his description, it said undead high elf, and actually, it's somewhere in the vanilla description of Forsaken, but Forsaken as a race are a mix of Lordaeron humans and high elves from Silvermoon when Arthas went on his march through Eversong. So it all depends on what you want to play. Just make sure it makes sense.
I'm just going to mention this. Ghostlands and the entire Scar through Quel'Thalas, those elves got raised as ghouls, which would then have become Forsaken if they regain their free will. So there is a faction, or not a faction, but a sub-race within Forsaken that is elves. And I was able to play that. And people were like, yeah, cool, totally. That's legit. Do you play any sub-race?
I actually do not. I'm very vanilla in that sense, because I just like to be nobody in a way. I don't really like standing out, so my characters are always very much as you see them on paper. My night elf is a night elf, my blood elf is a blood elf, my orc is an orc. This is very, very bland. But I like it that way, because then I can build them up in different ways.
We should mention, like to the beginning role player, that it can be contentious. It can be contentious to choose a sub-race, especially if it's very rare, or if you wouldn't expect them to exist within the environment that they're in. So you wouldn't expect to see like a Sandlane blood elf in Silvermoon, right? Because right now they're an enemy. Maybe later, who knows?
That's the thing to remember is if you can make it make sense, then why not? And there's this really cool, maybe Jack, because you play as a mage, but there's this way where mages can use a toy and a spell, or maybe it's not just mages, but there's a way you could basically infinitely keep a model of an NPC as your character using a toy and a special potion. Do you guys know that trick?
I've heard of it, but I've never done it.
So I've never done it, but I know of it too.
Jack, could you explain it? Do you know the mechanics? I don't know it, so if you can explain.
Oh no, I don't know the systems behind it. I know people do it. I know it's a lot of work.
Okay, so
really,
and someone's going to correct me because I'm wrong, but the example that I can think of the most is there was a character in Orgrimmar, and he was role-playing as an ogre. And when you moused over, his entire character profile was Mugdar, the Boulder Fist ogre, all these descriptions. And
cool.
Player-wise, he was just an orc shaman. But he used a particular toy to steal the appearance of an ogre from Draenor, so he used one of the new ogre models. He then summoned one of his pets, and he gave that appearance to his pet. And then he used a toy to swap that appearance back to him. And it was a 5-minute long spell.
Right.
But every 2 minutes he could reset
Wait a minute. Is that Brutunk?
Maybe. This was on Wormrest Accord way back in the day.
Okay, Roman, because we have another character like that on Moonguard named Brutunk.
And he plays an ogre?
He plays an ogre very well. He was very popular.
And there's a way you can basically steal the appearance of an NPC, put it onto your pet, and then swap it with yourself every 2 minutes, and you have to do it every 5 minutes. And it's a little bit of a hassle, as Jack said. There's some work to it, but this character on Moonguard and this other character I'm talking about on Wormrest, they played as ogres, and ogres in the Horde is not unheard of. That is possible. And he used game mechanics, and he had to watch his time, because he had to make sure that during his scene, when he was typing, his spell didn't fade. He kept this going, and he kept up this little facade of he was an ogre. And although he wasn't physically playing an ogre model, he still had the ability to use these toys and spells to give him that appearance, which just helped build the fantasy. So he used
That's so much fucking work.
And it's a lot of work, but it was like, damn, like I'm playing with an ogre right now, as opposed to a really big orc, an orc who used a growth potion in game and pretending they're an ogre. Well, I look at you and I'm seeing an orc, but I'll use my imagination. Then there's Brutonk, or whatever his name is, comes in and he looks like an ogre so that means when he logs in, he has to go to Draenor, find his ogre model, steal the appearance, and then make sure he maintains
he had what's called an ogre idol. This is from the old card game.
Oh, that toy.
The toy. He got lucky. He got the ogre idol. And that gives him an appearance, I don't know for how long, but quite longer. Gives him like a red ogre image or something like that.
It's the old vanilla ogre. I remember that toy. And using one of the other toys in game, he could probably, towards the end of the spell, as it's fading, give the appearance of him to his pet, and then just swap it back over using this image reversal toy. There's a toy out there. I don't know what's called.
I think it was like
There's a toy.
It's a toy, if I recall correctly, because I can't look it up right now. I think it was like and they may have changed it since the last time, because they did change a lot of toys.
They do often.
Time and things like that. So if I recall correctly, it was a 5-minute spell, but it was also a 5-minute cooldown.
Yeah, and you can, it was possible to forever maintain this fake image, and
especially with macros and shit like that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so when you pick your race, you're not limited. So, but we're not saying, as a new role player, make an ogre. We're not telling you to do that.
Subrace, we should say, is advanced. That should be an advanced thing. Don't just roll an ogre from the start when you don't even know how to say hi to a tavern.
Exactly. And if you want
if you're an ogre, you wouldn't know either way.
That's right. True. If
so it's immersive.
You want to roll a dwarf and you want Wildhammer tattoos, it's a little bit easier than being a half orc or an ogre or something like that. Same with classes. When you pick your player class, you don't have to be what your player class is. Play a paladin, maybe your character is just a farmer. Maybe your character is just a woodworker. Your character...
By the way, we're class options, please, Blizzard. Farmer. Wink, wink.
I mean, technically, you could say, like, my class is just something special that's very rare or, like, just out of character, not part of my in-character thing. But my profession is who my character is. My character is actually a jeweler. And she has a stand that she puts up at every fair where she sells these necklaces. And I'm very proud of my necklaces. And then you can get, like, really in detail of, like, oh, man, like, what are these necklaces like? And all these things.
And gameplay-wise, you mouse over and it'll say, a blood elf rogue, but character-wise, they're not running around stabbing people. They're running around making necklaces, and that's I used to have a character.
And also,
Go ahead.
I know I remember when Wrath of the Lich King came out, Death Knights were introduced. It was like, first new class. People were all over that. But they didn't play. Not everyone played as a Death Knight. I've seen Mage Warriors, I think, was one of them a lot. And Necromancer.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't dead, but they could summon the dead.
Yeah, Cult of the Damned. Oh, the Cult of the Damned. I was in the Cult of the Damned guild on Moonguard. That was fun.
Mm-hmm. So I do remember that. They rolled Death Knights, but they weren't playing as Death Knights.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's totally, it's up to you, but it's also limited to the lore. So, I played a character who was just a farmer. He was he was an old retired soldier from the Second War. And character-wise, class-wise, he was a hunter. And he walked around with his dog. His dog was with him in Stormwind, and he was this little bit of a hillbilly, a little bit of a hick character, who, a little bit of a chubby old guy. But I didn't run around with a bow shooting things. But back in the day, he was a sniper. So, you can...
I know this character. I remember him.
Remember Boris?
I know Yes, I do remember Boris.
Boris, he had this horrible, crusty accent, and he was. Oh my god! His pants were always falling down, and he was this,
a nasty t-shirt,
a nasty sweaty shirt, but like overweight character, and everyone laughed at him. He was a party, but he was just this old hillbilly with a straw hat and this t-shirt with holes in it, and he was a war veteran, but after the war, his life didn't. He escaped the scourge and all this stuff, and all this. He had his fair amounts of excitement, but he just walked around and bar hopped in Stormwind and slept in the gutter kind of thing. That was his gig. And even though he was a human hunter, I didn't run around with him with a bow shooting at things in the city. I played him as a farmer, as just like a fun character.
You have to choose a class to progress. Like, you can't just be no class.
Exactly.
That's true.
A lot of people play paladins or warriors just to unlock all the armor potential. They want to be able to wear cloth, leather, mail, and plate, because the thing is, when you're running around Stormwind and you're role-playing, you don't have to be in your armor. You could be in your RP set. We'll talk about that after. But don't let that be the only thing that limits you. You have no preference? Sure, pick a plate wearer.
It doesn't have to be simple either. Like, I play a very high-level character who's supposed to be decently powerful within the current story. She is a priest, but I role-play her as a mage. And I say that she's an oracle or like a divination specialist. So that makes it so that the priest spells of prevention and mind vision and all of that are actually more relevant than, say, mage spells, because she doesn't teleport or cast fire spells. She's trying to see far away. So you're like, I'm a priest, but I'm actually a mage in character.
Oh man, I'm so vanilla compared to you guys. Like, I actually play my characters as their race, and
that's great too. There's great lore about just being a paladin, right? Like you don't have to be like a half elf, whatever. That doesn't actually exist. You can be like just Janai paladin. And
Isei, if you don't mind, tell people about your crusty old night elf boy, because he's pretty.
Oh my god,
he's pretty different. He's not.
I'm trying to teach people not to love him. Don't encourage him.
No, but he's not a. He's not just a druid. Tell people about your boy.
First of all, I want to see you say his name correctly, because that's always like the number one challenge for people.
I say no names correctly, so.
So I'm gonna say Birgis.
There we go, Birgis.
Did I say it right?
I'm gonna say.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Birgis.
And I'm gonna say Birgis.
I'm gonna try and make sure Jeff puts up a little picture of Birgis up on the stream right now. But if you're comfortable, tell people about Birgis and why he's different from a typical druid, and why Legion was particularly special.
We're just going to encourage Birgis. That's not good.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think he's interesting, because he's an asshole, but give a very quick description of his class and how it's not just a regular druid.
I mean, he is a druid in the sense as he does what druids do. He's very much part of the Cenarian Circle. He's very much a protector of his people and, what you would expect a druid to be, but he is known as a highborn wannabe. He loves the lifestyle, the lavish, the silk, the gold, and that's something that drives him, which is, it's unusual for a druid when they're so nature-based to gravitate towards luxuries. But that's what my druid really likes, and he has used his powers of druidism to kind of niche his way into highborn circles and even in Suramar saying, I have this type of power that you don't have. So my magic is about equivalent to yours, so that means I am just as good as you.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the concept there. I love when there's a dichotomy like that, or an unusual flair that still fits well within the established lore. That's awesome.
I mean, there's more layers to him, of course, and
of course,
a lot of. I mean, he's been around since my goodness, vanilla. I've had him forever.
By the way, like when you're creating a character, speaking to the audience here, like you don't feel bad that you don't have this deep, nuanced character. That comes with time.
No, that comes. I mean, who Bjergis was when I first role played him to what he is now. World of difference, and he's not a good person either. A lot of people, he's very popular. He is surprisingly one of my most popular characters, and I actually don't really role play him much because I don't have time. But every little detail I give more about him, people just really like it. I guess because of what you said, that dichotomy that he is, I guess not a villain, but an anti-hero. His aim is not to conquer or destroy the world. But he wants things done his way. He has his own vision of what he wants in his life, and he's going to get it. He doesn't like people getting in his business because they just kind of stick their nose into everything. He doesn't want that kind of trouble. He doesn't want trouble. He just wants to live his life in his luxuries, his way.
Love that.
What I found so interesting about Bjergis, and I won't talk about your character for you, but particularly the arcane and the Arkandor and druid magic. Arcane magic isn't really popular with druids. That's not a thing yet.
No, and actually, I'm so happy when the Arkandor thing was revealed, because that was something I was kind of theory crafting for like a very long time, because that was also another drive of him. He wanted to be part of the Highborn Circle for so long, but he knew he could only get so far with just druidism. He needed the arcane angle. He just couldn't tap into it, and he was a balanced druid, which kind of has nature arcane mixed into it, but you couldn't compare it to a mage. Really wanted to get to it, but one of the first rules of mages is don't mix magics. It is volatile.
True.
But almost certain, because of the balanced magic, he was like, okay, you don't mix magics. At the same time, there's something to be unearthed here that maybe you could. So he was kind of theory crafting with that, and I was as well. And as soon as the Arkandor and the story was revealed, I was like, yes, I knew it! Both of us were like, I knew it!
Now, as an aside, some of you may be listening and going, oh, you guys know some stuff about the story. You seem to be drawing from a lot of lore here. You've been playing for more than a decade. I'm just starting. Where do I go? They're great materials. You'll learn a lot if you actually read the quest text. Read the quest text. But I'd say the number one resource for me, especially when I was a newer role player, was Wowpedia. At the time, it was more WoWWiki, but now it's Wowpedia.
That's Bible. That was my Bible for so long.
That's the Bible. So if you're curious about stuff, just go to Wowpedia and then start looking up things that interest you. And you will find lore that is relevant to your interests. That's a great place to get started if you don't know where to start, and if you don't know a whole lot about the story. Like if you've been skipping the quests, like just doing the objectives and not reading the flavor, then eventually you'll get into reading that stuff, reading the dialogue, reading what's coming out, and read the Chronicles, which are great books. They're pretty. Put them on your shelf.
The new Bible.
The new Bible.
Your new Bible. I agree.
Like the New Testament.
So you've picked your class, you've picked your race, and again, you pick an orc warrior, but maybe you're a Blackrock peon. You don't actually have to be what you want to be. Now you get to choose, are you 100% for the Horde, or are you a little bit more neutral? Are you an Argent Dawn orc? Are you a Tauren druid who is not aligned with the Horde? You don't wear black and red, but rather you are part of the Cenarian Circle. You are fully neutral. Are you part of the Kirin Tor? Kirin Tor are one of the most interesting organizations because you can be fully neutral. And there are people who do play 100% neutral, and there is such a thing as cross-faction roleplay. And I really hope Blizzard gets rid of the language barrier, because that would open so much potential Right now,
Void Elves can do that.
Void Elves and Blood Elves,
Void Elves
and Demon Hunters
Mages
can talk with each other. Mages
Demon
too.
Hunters.
So at this point, Mages, Demon Hunters, and Void Elves can all talk. And Pandaren. Why not just get rid of it, Blizzard? They don't want the factions to troll each other. Fine, keep it on for Battlegrounds. But really, like, it would open so much potential because there are reasons to roleplay with the opposite faction. For neutral storylines, or
to collaborate.
Exactly.
Let's kill this rare together, if you want to make a gameplay case.
I think we've rambled enough because I think for the next part of this conversation is you picked your race, you picked your class, you picked your faction, and who you're aligned with. Now I get to decide how you look, and we're not talking about your player model. This is
like building a sandwich. Like making a character is like building a sandwich. Okay, so you got your 2 slices.
You've decided what bread you want, and you've decided
what are you gonna put in it.
But now we get to actually put it together, and we're gonna save that for next episode because I think between Jack, Isei, and I talking about transmog and appearances and art, this is another derail that's gonna cost a lot of time. So we're gonna stop.
We can talk about art.
That's the only reason why I'm stopping this here is because I realized, oh crap, character art is a huge thing. So let's...
Isei and I are both character artists.
Actually, and I just sit here appreciating the art. So we're going to stop this podcast.
Character art is my income, yes.
Actually though, this was a fun topic. This was a fun... this is a series that I hope we can come back to and have little workshops and again, not tell people how to roleplay, but guidelines and give them ideas and little nudges and stuff like this. So
absolutely, you hear advice from us, but don't take that as something that you have to do. What you're doing with your friends and what your interpretation of the story is, that's correct. There's nothing that's wrong. What's important is that you're having fun and that you're making a compelling story for yourself. Your interpretation of the lore is your own perspective, and that's interesting. Get into debates about it. Go on the forums and say, hey, this is what I think about the Void, and then see what somebody else thinks about the Void. Yeah, fight me. And then together, you'll actually come to a compromise as to like, well, maybe it's this. And then that's where good headcanon comes in. Oh God, that's a rambling point. This has been a rambling, this whole thing has been a rambling point. But that's actually kind of in itself a point, because roleplay is a collaborative experience, and you're not just going to follow a script. You're going to get to some place
like
that's
we're trying
new.
to follow this script.
This script is not being followed.
No, not even remotely.
Like roleplay.
It's a
like
metaphor.
roleplay.
It's a metaphor like bees and honey and flies. Like it's just one shithole of a metaphor.
Please add that to your Forsaken RP now. It's like catching flies with honey. Wait, what?
Yeah, right. This is the flies on the
trash
trash
heap. No, but you do catch flies with honey. Isn't that the same?
You do. You also catch it with...
We're right. We're both right.
God-moding trash. Oh, man. See, I've lost my point.
That's okay.
In the midst of the ramble. Thank you. This has been special. This has been a fun introduction to roleplay, and we're gonna definitely bring... I'll make sure that every episode of the little roleplay workshop and podcast that Isei and Jack do come back, because they have been doing this, and I've been doing this for a long time, and we've met so many people. Again, I met Jack through our roleplay guild, our Forsaken Roleplay, and I met Isei. I found her art on Wormrust Accord. That's how I met both of these two people, and honestly, so many of my real life friends. There was someone I met at BlizzCon. Jordan, if you're listening to this, I met someone at BlizzCon who looked at my badge, the character art that Isei did for my orc, and recognized my orc. He was like, dude, you play in Wormrust Accord. I know that name. And I was like, no fucking way. And then he starts throwing out facts about my character and about things that he's seen. And I was like, no way. And this guy standing in front of me in line just happened to look at this cool piece of art hanging on my chest, looked at the name and was like, wow, bro, I know you. And that was cool. And now we're friends. His name's Jordan. Jordan, what's up? I've met so many people from, and it's, I hate to sound really cheesy, but roleplay in World of Warcraft has changed my life completely. World of Warcraft as a whole has changed my life. I've met so many people and it's put me on this path. But specifically roleplay and the people I've met and the stories I can now tell, they've shaped who I've become. They've shaped who the Lost Codex has become. I started on my path because I wrote a machinima
for my Forsaken character. It's a Machinima, though. I am Forsaken. That's his story. And that's what set me on this path. And here we are.
We were so proud of you.
I have to confess, I've never rolled a Forsaken character.
Oh my god.
You should roll a Forsaken. Everybody who's listening should roll a Forsaken. That should be your default. That's the most interesting character you'll be. You can be a sentient zombie.
There's Draenei, I'm just saying.
25,000 alien, a undead with a lot of horrors and terrible things inflicted onto it, and I have a hard time choosing which side I like better. And when you're done the book, when you're done this book, we'll come back with a special podcast of Jackie Say and I.
Convince me to roll Forsaken.
Maybe your new character will be redeemed.
You can't. Oh, wow. Pun intended. You can't listen to our last week's podcast, Isei, until you finish the book. But once you have finished it, when you're doing one of your art binges, listen to Jack and I talk about Forsaken for 2 hours, because it's actually it's the same way you and I talk about Draenei.
It's far more cogent.
There's a lot there. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode 10 of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. My name is Jesse, and with me is Jack.
Thanks for having us.
And Isei.
I will be back.
I have no choice in the matter. She will be back, whether I want it or not. Jackie, say
I will be back unless I get Calitrid, and then who knows?
Did you just make a pun on not being able to say her name? You're awful. You are a. Okay, Jack. Tell these people where they can tell these.
Get out! You're no longer. You're uninvited now. Get out.
We'll explain that later. Say, Jack. Tell these people where they can find you on the internet, not in real life.
I am not a social media user. However, you can find me on ArtStation. ArtStation.com. Look for Bodwell, Bodhwell. I'll have a lot of stuff going up there. You can check out one of my renderings of a half-elf and like it, comment on it, give me some critique. And yeah.
And
that's where I am.
Isei, tell these people where they can find you on the internet.
Alright guys, you know where to find me. I am on Twitter and Tumblr, both Isei-Silva. So it should be pretty easy to find me, or just follow the Trail of Draenei. That would always lead to me.
Always.
The Trail of Draenei.
Literally, the Trail of Draenei. And I will post links to both Jack's ArtStation and Isei's Tumblr and Twitter in the description. There's also going to be a link to our Discord. So if you want to participate in these conversations and you want to have these live debates with us about lore, characters, roleplay, thrall, honeys, bees, whatever you want to talk about, join our Discord. There's a million channels that you can join in on. Jack is in there. Isei is in there. Names you'll recognize are in there. And come join the Lost Codex Sanctum. It's a shit show, and there's a lot going on. And
they do bite.
They do bite
gently.
It's like good bites. It's like
you'll like it. You'll like it.
It's like a nibble.
It's a nibble. It's a good nibble. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode 10 of Decoded, the Lost Codex podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Maybe you guys want to do roleplay number 2 next week?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, let's do it. I always improvise these later in the week, but we're deciding right now. Next podcast, number 11, will be a return to roleplay. I haven't decided a title, but I have a week to decide.
A return to roleplay is a great title.
Actually, that works perfectly fine.
So we have an introduction to roleplay and a return to roleplay.
Return of the roleplay.
Return of the roleplayers. Something. Well, it's work in progress. We'll come to it.
The 2 roleplayers. I'm trying to make a Lord of the Rings thing.
Good God. All right, we're just gonna end this. We're just gonna end this.
Fellowship of the roleplay.
Thank you so much for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.